So the next job we're going to be doing is removing the 2 bolts for the oil pump. Now we've got both bolts out, you just want to be careful when you remove this. Because this car hasn't run for a while, it's likely not full of oil. But normal cars, if you've just pulled it out of your vehicle, it's likely to have a fair amount of oil in it. So make sure you have a rag handy. Okay, so she comes straight out. We'll flip the camera around and we'll pull the camshaft out from the other side. Now that we've removed the oil pump, we can remove the camshaft. But before we do, we need to remove the distributor shaft, which is just located at the end of the distributor. And the crankshaft needs to be in a particular position in order for it to be removed, otherwise you can't pull it out. So once you've pulled it out, you can set that to the side. Now with some vehicles, they do only go in one particular way because they do have 2 different size cutouts, top and bottom. We can look into this in the future. Now before I put it down, I'll tell you a quick story. I went to adjust my timing one day and I thought the gearing was out, so I was going to readjust it. I pulled it out, I went to reinstall it and it fell inside the gearbox. A mate came around and we spent an hour and a half fishing it out using magnets, finally pulled it all the way back through and got it reinstalled. So what you can do is get a 1/4 inch bolt, stick it in the end as long as you can possibly get, and that'll help you to guide it straight into the camshaft, and that way it's engaged. It is significantly easier to do it with the engine upside down, that way it's not going to fall out. Once it's in, put your distributor in, put your lock tab in, and then that way it's not going to come out whatsoever. So now everything is off, we can grab the camshaft and just guide it all the way out through the front. And there we have it. This is the camshaft. Now there's no real wear on this whatsoever. There's a little bit of spots here and there, but everything seems to be running quite smooth. You want to be looking at the cam lobes itself, making sure that none of them have gone flat, that there's no scoring, marks or whatsoever. The fact that it's still oily shows to me that it has had oil running through the system and that none of the cam bearings are destroyed. But because we're replacing the camshaft, we're going to go a bigger 266 camshaft, we're going to get new cam bearings as well. Now the next thing we're going to be doing is removing the Conrods. So make sure that when you remove them, you number them 1 to 4 or 1 to 8, 1 to 6, 1 to 12, however many cylinders you're doing. That way when you put them back together, because they're a cracked fit, meaning that they're not machined surfaces on either side, they're physically stretched to a point where they forcibly crack. They need to marry up on each side. If you put the wrong side on the wrong one, you're not going to have a very good time. So we want to make sure that we number them 1 through to 4. So in our case, the front of the engine, which is this part here, is where the crank pulley is. At the front of the engine, in an inline cylinder engine, you'll always find cylinder number 1 at the front where the crankshaft pulley is. Now some silly cars like French cars or even European cars, they do it differently. But in our case, it's going to be the harmonic balancer is at the front of the engine. So the first cylinder is going to be number 1, followed by 2, 3, and 4. So all I'm going to do is roll the crankshaft around, grab my permanent marker, I'm going to put a number on it, and then I'm going to put a line with a couple of dots. So as you can see, what I've done here is I've put 2 pink dots on one side. I've written the number 1 on the top, and then on the back side of it, I've also drawn a line. That's to ensure that they all marry up and I'm not doing the same 2 dots on both sides. That way I'm not running into any confusion down the road. Once you've numbered every single one, you can then go ahead and start removing your Conrods. So now we've numbered all the Conrods, we can now start to remove them. So once you relieve the pressure off them, they should just come apart fairly simple. So we're just going to take them off one at a time, put them in order. That way we're not going to get them mixed up. Now we'll push all the way out through the bottom. Once we've done all four, we can then slide them out with the engine on its side. Make sure as well, if there are any bearings that leave behind, you take them off and match them up to where they came from. So now we've loosened off all of the Conrods, we are then going to shimmy the engine over. We're going to lean it on its back, and then we're going to pull the pistons out through the top of the deck. Here's another Tomos tech tip of the day. I'm going to show you a mechanics trick that we use to push in and out pistons. We're going to be using a hammer, but we're not going to be using the ball peen end. We're going to be using the wooden end. So you're going to be pushing this up the guts of it. It's going to be sitting at the end of the conrod. Then we're going to be applying our dead blow hammer to the ball peen end, which is then going to push the piston out through the top. Same when you reinstall it. You want to get yourself a piece of timber or even a hammer like this, but you want to be pushing the top of the piston, which is the crown, in with the wooden side. That way you're not going to be damaging it with the steel ball peen hammer. Okay, so there we have it. We have all four pistons out. We have the conrods as well as the conrod caps, or what we call the big ends. Now, you want to be looking at bearings and seeing if there's any scoring in there. These bearings look fairly fresh, if not new, so they're likely in good condition, but because we're going to be getting the crank polished, they're going to be remeasuring them and telling us whether we need to reuse these, which we likely won't, or if we need to buy oversized bearings. If you see any marks on there like heavy grooves, scratches, pitting, anything that looks abnormal to all the rest, you then want to be looking at things like the crankshaft and seeing if it's an oil starvation problem or if something has been machined incorrectly on the crankshaft. This one looks really good, so even though we can turn it around by hand, there's no apparent wear on anything at all that shows any signs of oil starvation or even any style of pitting or damage whatsoever. Oh, there's the bearing for number 4, so we just make sure we take that off as well. So that's it, guys. That's how we disassembled the engine, getting it ready to go to the machine shop. I'll send it to the machine shop this week. They'll do the boring, the measuring, the grinding, everything. Let me know the parts that we need. Then I'll get the ball rolling and we'll continue again on the next episode. So stay tuned and I'll see you next time on the episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups, all things DIY and mechanical.